Good morning.
Good morning, Jennifer.
In the book of Exodus 3:7-8, the Lord, speaking from the burning bush, says to Moses, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. For I know their sorrows, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hands of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land into a good and larger land, to the land flowing with milk and honey.
All right.
Who doesn't want milk and honey? So, I invite you to join me in using the power of the spoken word to create the life we desire. Read with me out loud from the screen. Despite the lack of evidence and seeming barrenness of what I desire, I now prepare for my expanded good. Because I prepare, I am open mentally to recognize it and accept it as it comes to me. I am grateful it is mine now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Beautiful. Thank you, Jennifer. Maybe I'll put this down. So I think you can see by the affirmation what we're setting up this month. And it is to become masters of prosperity consciousness, which means to be able to look beyond the appearances of seeming barrenness, like the wilderness in the story of Moses, barrenness, or it seems like things are missing, to look beyond that to the awareness of the higher vision for our lives. The land of milk and honey is another word for it. But the land of milk and honey, actually, in the story of Moses, is symbolic of an internal prosperity that must take place first before it shows up in our lives. It goes back to that concept that I shared last week about be, do, have. Because as mystics, as metaphysical masters of spiritual truth, we are aware, right? That it starts with being. It starts with the inner shifts and changes in our own presence. And so in order to have what we choose, we must first be it. And I know when I first heard this, like, well, how do I be it if I don't have it, But the truth is that's how it works. That's as spiritual masters, we become the qualities of the divine that we wish to see demonstrated in our world first. So it's being first, and then we find that we are automatically doing or taking the actions that represent that state of consciousness. Everything comes from that, and it's a subconscious state that I'm talking about. As we begin to establish beliefs of prosperity as our divine inheritance, it begins to inform our actions. We take right action. And it shows up as things manifesting in our lives that match that inner environment that we've cultivated. And the story of Moses that I'll be using this entire month, there's so much. I mean, my gosh, the man lived 120 years according to biblical history. Although we're beginning to learn, or we're learning what I've learned by taking the Aramaic translation, or the awareness of how they wrote these stories from the Hebrew tradition, is that these things are symbolic. They're highly symbolic. And so when we hear the word 40-year periods, there are three 40-year periods in Moses' life, what we're doing is we're listening with metaphysical ears and realizing that 40, the term, the number 40 represents something. It's not meant to be taken literally. I mean, think of all the instances where 40 was used. Um, 40 days that Noah was on the ark. Buddha sat under the Bodhi tree for 40 days. Goliath taunted the Israelites for how many days? 40 days until David showed up. What are some other ones? Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days. And so Moses and the Israelites were in the wilderness for 40 years. Caught you. 40 years. But there's the number 40. And so what it means actually in these esoteric teachings, remember, these teachings have these deep meanings for our own journey in consciousness. And so 40 actually means how long it takes, the time it takes, whatever it is, until transformation, the time it takes for transformation of consciousness. 40, the number 40. So, as we proceed, this number has that kind of significance. So keep that in mind as we move through the story. So actually, what I'm going to be covering today is three basic periods, 40-year periods in Moses' life. The first one, the Egyptian period, the second one, the Midian desert period, and the final one, the wilderness period. And in each of these periods, there is a development in consciousness, particularly in prosperity consciousness in Moses, that not only supports him, but helps him to become the amazing leader and the very prosperous man that he is, but a great leader of the Hebrews out of the grips of the Egyptian bondage and slavery and into that this thing that we call the land of milk and honey. And it was a process, 120 years of a process. Well, I know for myself, I thought, well, I'm not going to wait for 120 years. I want to learn this stuff now. And I mean, I have been practicing and learning and deepening all along. But there is so much rich wisdom in this story of Moses. And I'm just so excited to be revisiting it myself and sharing it from this higher perspective. So is everybody ready?
Yes.
All right. Wonderful. Okay, so here's the thing about prosperity consciousness that I think is so important, is that prosperity consciousness, mastering this, is so important because it helps us to have the stability in our lives, financial, relationship, health, because prosperity involves all of that. It's not just about money. It's about all of that, all of the good. It helps us to establish a stable inner environment and external environment so that we can give our gifts and talents in service to humanity. We each have an abundance of gifts and talents within us just waiting to be shared. Can you feel that? Yeah. And so as we master this thing called prosperity consciousness, we can without struggle devote ourselves to that completely. Now, one of the things about Moses that is really important to understand is remember what his origins were. He originated as an Israelite, right? Remember? And he was put in the basket by his mother and in a reed basket and sent down the river. And who picked him up? The daughter of King Pharaoh, the wealthiest man of his time. You could call him a billionaire in that time. And in the wealthiest ancient civilization of its time. So he was, he was pulled out of the water and he became from infancy a part of this wealthy, prosperous court and family. And so in essence, he was the adopted son of King Pharaoh. So this is what happened with the people that were particularly, I don't know about the women, but I know the men were initiated, trained in the mysteries of their time, the mysteries, the ancient mystery schools of wisdom. In fact, the word Moses, the esoteric name, now this is according to Catherine Ponder. I've been using her book called The Millionaire Moses as a source for this, for what I'm doing here. The esoteric meaning of Moses is one admitted into the mystery schools of wisdom. Interesting, huh? So that's another thing about biblical wisdom that's important to understand is that the names that are given to the different characters in the Bible represent different states of consciousness. So they are teaching stories. They may have some basis in fact, but they're also one of the things that the people of those cultures do is they exaggerate their stories. They fill them with all kinds of symbology to teach consciousness, to teach spirituality and consciousness to their people. So when we look at it from that standpoint, we are so enriched by it. We get out of the habit of trying to argue whether something's fact or fiction or whatever, and we say, no, let's glean the deeper meaning for ourselves out of these great teachings. And they're full of symbolism and mysticism and meaning. One admitted into the mystery school of wisdom. So therefore, as a prince, he received this instruction. The same instruction that the Egyptian priests received. And the foundational law that underpinned it all is the idea that substance is the source of all that is. So what is substance? We hear the term substance used spiritually. What does that mean? It's another word for what? God. It's another word for God. All right. And Wallace Wattles, in his book, The Science of Getting Rich, which also is a very metaphysical rendering of prosperity consciousness, he says that everything we see on earth is made of the one original substance. There is no limit to this formless substance. And then I'm going to add to that, shorten that and adapt it a little bit. What he's saying is that this substance interpenetrates all form. And when, just again, referring to the Deepak Chopra and his teachings and what scientists are finding is that there is a lot of what they call dark energy or energy that we can't see, in other words, but the universe is full of energy just waiting to take form. And what we see as the physical universe is like this teeny tiny percent of all the possibility and potentiality in divine substance that is available for us to use. It is not only within us, it surrounds us. And every time we think, we use it. That is the foundational understanding that we are to grasp in order to even proceed with prosperity consciousness. is to really take time and meditate upon that. And actually, that's what we're doing in our spiritual practices class right now, is we're meditating on this concept of this substance of the divine, this creative medium that we live in, which is an aspect of God that takes the impress of our thought and brings it into manifestation. Now, here's the deal. Moses, in this early period, grasped it only on a mental level. He didn't go deeper, and he'll go deeper later. But in this early period of the Egyptian period, he got a mental perspective. And in the format of what Reverend Michael has taught, he's set up the stages of consciousness. There's what's first, the victim stage, right? That's when we think life is happening to me and there's nothing I can do. I'm a victim of life. Okay, I'm exaggerating, but that's the essence of it. And as we begin to learn spiritual law, we move into manifester. I can make things happen. There's a lot of force in that stage. This is the stage that Moses was in the early stages, that he could make things happen. And when you think about the entire, probably King Pharaoh and everyone else, that's probably where they were, because they were into making it happen, using the laws to become wealthy. And what you get then is spiritual materialism, and you can get really stuck there. So here's what happened. When we try to use the power of our word to force people and conditions to do what we want, we are in that manifester stage. And here's what happens. Instead of getting free of our problems, we usually tend to attract more problems, a feeling of stuckness. Like when Moses killed the Egyptian guard for abusing the Israelites, and then he had to escape because he was in trouble. He was trying to use force to change conditions. And so, like Moses, we don't have to continue to suffer from that stage, the manifester stage. It's an important stage because we learn the laws of prosperity, right? I mean, it's important. It's not that we want to eliminate it, but it's stage one of learning how to deepen into the higher plane. So when we find ourselves in a mess, it's important to remember only good can come from this. Repeat that after me.
Only good can come from this.
Only good can come, right. A good way to just shift our consciousness into receiving the good. So there's a higher and better way. We learn the laws of prosperity, but there's a higher and better way. And that's what happens in the Midian desert experience. So he escapes. He heads out to the desert, the Midian desert. And the Midian, by the way, has to do with, the term has to do with challenges, a time of challenge. And so upon arrival in the Midian desert, he brings his prosperity consciousness with him. So who does he meet but the daughter of a very wealthy desert chief, Midian chief. And so he marries into that family. Jethro is the name of the man, the chief. And he's now able to not only help tend the sheep, but he's able to find a lot of time for solitude. So the Midian desert time is a time of going within, of meditating, of deepening into the inner realms, and gaining in spiritual strength and gaining in spiritual connection. And he began to realize that rather than trying to straighten out other people out there, that he needed to do what? Straighten out his own thinking. So he spent a lot of time straightening out his own thinking and his own feelings and bringing himself into a state of peace. And that is when he encountered the burning bush. and the voice of Jehovah. Jehovah, by the way, metaphysically means the God within. So that burning bush, again, a symbol of the fire that doesn't consume us, the fire within that is ever burning, the spark within, the divine spark, whatever it could be, and the voice of the spirit of our divine essence, our higher selves, speaking to us and guiding us. And so when he heard the words of, that Jennifer just read about freeing the people of Israel from, um, from the bondage of the Egyptians and setting them free, he was hearing the guidance of the divine within him. This was what the vision was, his vision, his highest vision, the highest use of his life. And can you imagine when he first listened to it? Now, he'd been working on developing his inner consciousness and his own inner strength. That might have sounded pretty scary. Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to go and lead 2 million people out of Egypt against the Egyptian army? Are you kidding me? I mean, can you imagine how he might feel initially? But as he continues to deepen in this period of the Midian desert experience, he continues to grow in strength and continues to trust the guidance, and strong enough so that he's able to finally face King Pharaoh. And he wasn't sure how he was going to do this, so he was guided to use a rod, from the Jehovah, the presence within. And he learned that when he raised the rod, he brought blessings. And when he lowered the rod, curses. And so this, again, is a powerful symbol for us, just as it was for the people who heard these teaching stories years ago. And because what was the name that Jehovah said he was? I am that I am. I am that I am. He was reminding he was teaching, it was the inner teacher from within, that the I am, the word I am, is the name of God individualized as us. I am. And so your I am is your name of God power, of creative power that is within you. So when you misuse I am, you bring misery to yourself. What are some misuses of I am? I am sick, I am afraid, I am weak, I am discouraged, I am unworthy, I am depressed, anything like that, and cancel. That's not the truth. And the truth is your I am presence cannot be sick or cannot be any of those other things in truth. So it's just kind of a little cover that is covering over the truth of your own being. And so as we meditate on the words I am in an uplifted way, I am, and we're thinking about our God nature. I am, okay, what are some other? I am good. I am loving. I am
joyful.
I am wise. Intelligent.
Divine activity.
I am divine activity. I am peace.
Compassion.
I am compassion. I am abundant. I am prosperous. See how that works? How do you feel when you say that? Do you feel the energy? I mean, I do. I can feel streams of energy flowing through me when I speak this truth. And when you speak the other, how does that feel? When you say that other stuff, I am sick, blah 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 blah, all that stuff. It drains your energy. It cuts. Actually, what it's doing, it cuts off the flow of the divine good. So, what follows I am in your life? I invite you for this next week to play, and actually for the rest of your life, to place some attention on where, particularly your words, I mean, in your mind, it can go on. And we talked about the 60,000 thoughts a day. But if we change our words, if we begin to say, I am, in an uplifted way, we begin to shift everything in our own environment. We become that beneficial presence that we were talking about earlier when we all set our intention. Using I am correctly, the name of God, power in you. So every time you say I am and follow it with something, you are creating your destiny. Get that? Your destiny. So let's now move into the wilderness period. So we can see how things are beginning to shift and change in Moses. He learned the laws of prosperity and the wisdom teachings of the mystery schools. And then through his desert experience of becoming connected with the inner divine, he began to have conversations with his own higher self, with the God within. And another word for that is intuition. He began to develop his intuition. And we know that intuition then is God in us, guiding us, directing us in the direction of our good. So he's moved from an external God, thinking God is just something out there, to realizing the divine is not only out there, it's within me. And that's where I make my connection. So he developed a personal and intimate relationship with the divine. So now we move into the wilderness period. And this is the time of Exodus. And Exodus actually means a way out of trouble. Isn't that cool? A way out of trouble. That's the mystical meaning. So Moses guided the Hebrews out of trouble by teaching and demonstrating the lavish laws of prosperity consciousness. And notice where he did it. In barren wilderness, where they didn't know where they were going to get their next drink or their next bit of food. He was teaching prosperity principles there. And so they manifested things called manna and water out of rocks. And, so remember, all of these stories are symbols of how even in what seems to be barren in our lives, because we have God consciousness, prosperity consciousness, the divine I am within us, we can create something new. We can create something new. That's the beauty of who we are. And when we know that, that is the mastery of prosperity consciousness. So his mission then was teaching and demonstrating lavish prosperity consciousness in the midst of barren wilderness. Cool, huh? And during that time, so this was the last 40 years of his life, up to age 120. So at age of 120, he brought them right up to the land of Canaan, the land of milk and honey. And Canaan, by the way, means the realm of substance. The realm of substance. And that's when Moses made his transition and his people went on in. And so here's one of the things that happened during that wilderness period, though, is there were a lot of ups and downs. 1 minute, the Hebrew people were praising him and so grateful that they escaped. And then when things seemed to get hard, they would criticize him. I can't believe that we followed this man out into the wilderness. They went into criticism. So their prosperity consciousness was going like this. How often does that happen with us? Oh, I'm grateful, I'm so thankful, and oh, I can't believe this is happening to me again. That's the lesson we're learning from that whole wilderness experience of the Hebrews. Is because of the unevenness of their prosperity consciousness, their moments of lack of faith, they remain stuck in the wilderness for 40 years. Anybody ever feel stuck in your life at times? Okay, the stuckness comes from uneven consciousness. And so the lesson here is to really make a commitment to strengthen our consciousness through meditation, through prayer, through affirmation, so that we have a sustained prosperity consciousness, even when things look barren, even when it looks like nothing's happening. We still remain faithful and full of commitment to the vision, the higher vision of our lives. So the point of the story is, Catherine Ponder puts it so beautifully. She said they could have gotten to the land of milk and honey earlier, but they decided to criticize Moses. So anyway, how can you then apply this to your life? I mean, that's always the question of these teachings, is what can I take home from what we learned today in order to strengthen and master this thing called prosperity consciousness, which is God consciousness, because prosperity is our divine nature. It's not like we're doing something that's out of alignment with our nature. That's who we are. And that's what these beautiful teachings of the Bible and other sacred texts are all about, is showing us who we are, what our divine nature is, that I am presence. So Moses' life then is a metaphor for creating prosperity from the inside out by developing prosperity consciousness. The first stage, the Egyptian phase, it's important to become, and I didn't emphasize this, but this is an important key. It's important to become comfortable with outer wealth. You know, when we criticize the wealth of others, we are actually cutting off our own wealth. So the more we can become comfortable with the idea of physical wealth, happiness, health, financial prosperity, and all of that, the sooner we can become comfortable with it, the sooner that we're able to be a more balanced person. And then how we apply the inner secrets of wealth is the other piece of it. So we become comfortable with outer material wealth, and we also apply the inner secrets of wealth, knowing that God is our source, substance is our source. The second period is the reminder that the great I am is our rod of power. The third period is that is the awareness that we trust in the divine even when things seem to be barren. So we trust the divine one day at a time. Keep our eye on the vision. Continue practicing I am in an uplifted way. And so that the question we want to ask ourselves then are we raising our rod high using our I am statements, or are we lowering it and bringing, so blessings this way, curses that way? You know, you can call them curses or just problems or whatever you want. So let's end then with this powerful I am prayer. So are we ready? Let's stand up. Let's really embrace it. Stretch your arms up, lift up your chin, and follow me. Ready? I am health.
I am health.
I am strength.
I am strength.
I am peace.
I am peace.
I am happiness and prosperity.
I am happiness and prosperity.
I am strong, vital, and well.
I am strong, vital, and well.
I am beautiful, peaceful, and poised.
I am beautiful, peaceful, and poised.
I am eternally youthful.
I am eternally youthful.
I'm happy and free.
I am happy and free.
I am now a great master
I am now a great master
of the power of I am.
of the power of I am.
All right. And so it is. All right. Oh, what happened to Pat? Oh. Okay, so while she's there, I'll take another moment and just invite all of you to make a commitment to use the I am this week. That's the one assignment that I'm giving you, if you choose to take it, is